Mum, we think it's time we had power of attorney. My son Mark said it. He stood in my living room, right on the good rug, the one I only vacuum in one direction. My daughter Susan stood beside him, nodding like one of those little dogs people put on their dashboards. The air still smelled of the apple pie I'd baked for them, warm and sweet with cinnamon. My old refrigerator hummed from the kitchen. They had brought papers, a whole folder of them, which Susan placed on my polished coffee table. She pushed them next to the framed photo of their father, Henry. I didn't look at the papers, I looked at their faces. They had my husband's eyes, both of them. But there was no warmth in them today. "It's just for emergencies," Susan said, her voice too bright. "You know, with you forgetting things lately." I had misplaced my reading glasses last week. They turned up in the pocket of my gardening apron. I had also forgotten to call my cousin Shirley on her birthday. I remembered the next day and sent a card. These were the things they were talking about. Mark cleared his throat. "We've already spoken to a lawyer, Mum. He said it's a simple process. Just a few signatures to make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of. Like an overgrown plant you stick in a corner. I smoothed the worn fabric of my armchair with my hand. I didn't say anything. I just watched them, the two children I had rocked to sleep in this very room. I watched them, and I felt the floor drop out from under my feet. After they left, the silence in the house was heavy. The pie sat on the counter, a perfect golden brown. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I walked through my small home, my hand trailing along the wall. Every picture, every little trinket, was a memory. There was the macaroni necklace Mark made me in kindergarten, hanging from a lamp. There was the lopsided clay pot Susan made in summer camp, holding my pens by the phone. I had poured my life into this house, into them. I remembered staying up all night sewing a costume for Susan's school play. I remembered driving Mark to hockey practice at 5 in the morning, the car smelling of cold air and coffee. My social security check wasn't much, but I always made sure to send them a little something for their own children's birthdays. I sat down at my kitchen table. The linoleum was cool under my feet. I stared at the phone on the wall for a long time. They thought I was fading, a watercolor painting left out in the rain. They didn't see me at all. I picked up the receiver. The plastic was smooth and familiar in my hand. "Dr. Evans's office," a cheerful voice answered. "Hello, Carol," I said. "It's Helen Gable. I need to schedule a cognitive assessment." The doctor's office smelled of rubbing alcohol and old magazines. The air conditioning hummed, a low, constant sound that made my teeth ache. I sat on the crinkly paper of the examination table, my purse clutched in my lap. My hands felt cold. Dr. Evans came in, a kind man with tired eyes and a soft smile. "Helen, good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances," he said. He sat on the little rolling stool. "You said on the phone you had some concerns." "My children have concerns," I corrected him gently. "They think I'm losing my mind." He didn't laugh, he just nodded. "It happens. Families worry. The test is simple, nothing to be afraid of. I'll ask you to remember a few words, draw a clock, name some animals. It just gives us a baseline." I looked at him, at the pen clipped to his white coat. "I need more than a baseline, doctor. I need proof." He held my gaze for a moment. I saw understanding in his eyes. "All right, Helen. Let's get you that proof." While he got the papers ready, I noticed the picture of the sailboats on the wall was crooked. It bothered me, that little tilt. It felt like my whole world at that moment. The test was quiet. Dr. Evans's voice was calm as he asked me to repeat 5 words: velvet, church, daisy, red, face. I said them back. He asked me to draw a clock, showing the time 11:10. I drew the circle, put the numbers in their places, and made the hands just right, the little one pointing to the 11 and the big one to the 2. He asked me to name as many animals as I could in 1 minute. I thought of my garden. Cat, dog, squirrel, robin, blue jay, raccoon, deer, rabbit. The list went on. It was easier than I thought. My mind felt clear, like a window after a good spring cleaning. The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 days, I went about my business. I weeded the petunias. I made a tuna casserole for the church potluck. The phone rang twice. Once it was Mark, the next day it was Susan. "Just checking in, Mum," Susan said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Did you eat a good lunch?" "Yes, dear. A turkey sandwich," I said. I didn't tell her I was also reorganizing my entire pantry. The call from Dr. Evans came on a Thursday morning. The sun was streaming through my kitchen window, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. "Helen, I have your results." I held my breath. "You scored a 29 out of 30. That's a fantastic score. There's absolutely nothing wrong with your cognitive function." I let out the breath I was holding. A wave of something washed over me. It wasn't happiness. It was cold, hard clarity. I thanked the doctor, hung up the phone, and looked out at my little backyard. The world looked exactly the same, but I was seeing it with new eyes. The next morning, I put on my good navy blue dress and my sensible heels. I drove myself to Mr. Davis's law office downtown. The building smelled of old books and floor wax. A grandfather clock ticked slowly in the corner of the waiting room, each tick a steady, reassuring heartbeat. Mr. Davis was old school, a man Henry had trusted completely. He had white hair and wore a tweed jacket even though it was May. He poured me a cup of coffee in a thin china cup. It was weak, but I held it for the warmth. "Helen," he said, his voice gentle. "It's good to see you. What can I do for you?" I didn't waste time. I placed the sealed envelope from Dr. Evans on his big mahogany desk. "My children are trying to have me declared incompetent," I said, my voice even. "They want power of attorney." He read the report. His eyebrows went up, just a little. He folded the paper and placed it back in the envelope. "I see. And what is it you would like to do?" "I want to protect what Henry and I built," I said. I looked him straight in the eye. "I want to put everything into an ironclad trust, one that they can't touch, one that I control." He leaned back in his big leather chair, which squeaked softly. "A trust is a very wise move, Helen. We can arrange that. We can make it airtight." I took a sip of the weak coffee. It tasted like the first day of the rest of my life. "Good," I said. "Let's get started." Mr. Davis steepled his fingers. The leather of his chair sighed as he leaned forward. "A trust is an excellent tool, Helen. It protects you and your assets from outside interests. We can name a trustee, someone you trust to manage things if you become unable." I shook my head. "No, I will be the trustee, for as long as I am able." My voice was firm. The china cup felt steady in my hand. "And the beneficiary will be me. My house, my savings, Henry's pension. Everything goes in." "And after?" he asked gently. "After, it can be divided. But while I am alive, it is mine to manage. To spend on my garden, or a trip to see the ocean, or to give to the cat shelter if I feel like it." I paused, thinking. "And I want a specific clause added. A little note for anyone who might read this document in the future." He picked up a pen, a heavy, old-fashioned fountain pen. What would you like it to say? I looked past him, out the window at the busy street below. Cars glinted in the sun. People walked by, living their own lives. I want it to say, "My mind is sharper than your greed." The next few days were spent with boxes. Old shoeboxes filled with receipts and bank statements. The air in my little office upstairs smelled of dust and aging paper. I found the deed to the house, the title for Henry's old Buick, the certificates for the few stocks he'd bought years ago. Each paper was a piece of our life together. I remembered how we saved for the down payment on this house. Henry worked overtime at the plant, and I took in sewing. We ate a lot of beans and rice that year. I found a faded photograph tucked into a bank book. It was Mark and Susan, toddlers in matching overalls, sitting on the front steps. They were smiling. My heart gave a little twist. The phone rang while I was sorting through a stack of Medicare statements. It was Mark. "Hi, Mum," he said. "How are you feeling? Did you remember to take your blood pressure pill?" "I'm feeling fine, dear." "And yes, I took my pill," I said, my fingers resting on a statement showing a withdrawal from my savings 5 years ago, a down payment for his new car. I didn't remind him. I just said, "I'm just doing a bit of spring cleaning." "Don't overdo it," he said. "We don't want you having a fall." They came for Sunday dinner. I roasted a chicken, the way their father liked it. The house filled with the smell of rosemary and garlic. I made mashed potatoes and green beans from my garden. They sat at my dining room table, the one I polished every Saturday. "This is delicious, Mom," Susan said, taking a second helping. "You shouldn't have gone to all this trouble." Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the silver candlesticks, the china cabinet. "It's no trouble," I said, passing the gravy. Mark cleared his throat. "So, Mom, have you had a chance to look over those papers we left?" "What papers?" I asked, looking at him over my glasses. I watched a little flicker of annoyance cross his face before he smoothed it away. "The power of attorney forms," he said slowly, like he was talking to a child. "For emergencies, to make sure you're taken care of." I smiled and took a small bite of chicken. The meat was tender. "Oh, those. I put them somewhere safe. Don't you worry about a thing. I'm feeling perfectly fine." I saw him exchange a look with Susan, a look that said, "See? She's already forgotten." I just kept eating my dinner. A week later, I was back in Mr. Davis's office. The grandfather clock ticked its steady rhythm. The papers were all laid out on the big mahogany desk. They looked important. The paper was thick and creamy under my fingertips. Mr. Davis pointed to the lines where I needed to sign. "This is the trust agreement," he explained, though he'd already gone over it with me twice. "It moves all your listed assets into the Helen Gable Revocable Trust. You are the sole trustee." I picked up the heavy fountain pen he offered me. The nib scratched softly against the paper as I signed my name. Helen Gable. It looked strong, confident. Then the notary, a serious young woman, witnessed my signature and pressed her seal into the paper. The clunk of the stamp was a solid, final sound. "And the special clause?" I asked, looking at Mr. Davis. He tapped a paragraph halfway down the last page. "Right here, as requested." I read the words. "My mind is sharper than your greed." They looked beautiful in black ink. "Thank you, Robert," I said, calling him by his first name for the first time in 30 years. "Thank you for everything." I drove home with the windows down. The spring air felt fresh and clean. I didn't go straight back to my empty house. Instead, I stopped at the garden centre. The air inside the greenhouse was warm and damp, smelling of rich earth and blooming flowers. I bought myself a rose bush, a beautiful one with deep red blossoms, the color of a summer sunset. It was more expensive than I would usually spend on a plant, but it felt right. I bought a big bag of good soil and a new pair of gardening gloves. When I got home, I didn't go inside. I went straight to the backyard, to the sunniest spot by the fence. I dug a hole in the cool, dark earth. My hands felt strong. I settled the rosebush into its new home, patting the soil around its roots. I gave it a long, deep drink of water. It looked like it belonged there. The sun was warm on my back, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a deep, quiet sense of peace. I was planting a new life, my life. The next week, I went to my bank. The air inside always smelled of clean paper and faint perfume from the tellers. The floor was polished marble that clicked under my sensible shoes. I had an appointment with the branch manager, a nice young man named Mr. Peters, who always called me Mrs. Gable. I sat in a comfortable chair across from his wide, empty desk. He had all my papers ready. I was changing the name on my accounts from Helen Gable to the Helen Gable Revocable Trust. It was just a formality. A few more signatures. "Everything seems to be in order," he said, smiling. "Your lawyer, Mr. Davis, sent over all the documentation." He pushed a form toward me. "Just sign here and here." As I signed, I saw my hand was steady. I thought about Mark telling me I shouldn't handle my own finances anymore. I slid the paper back to Mr. Peters. "There," I said. "All taken care of." The phone calls started to feel different. Before, they were a chore. Now, they were a game. Susan called on Tuesday. I was out back, pruning my new rose bush. The thorns pricked at my gloves, and the air smelled green and earthy. I left my gloves on to answer the cordless phone. "Mum? What was that noise? Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tight with alarm. "I'm fine, Susan. I was just in the garden. I dropped my trowel." I looked at the trowel, lying clean on the grass beside me. She sighed, a long, dramatic sound. "You really should be more careful. That's why Mark and I are so worried. Have you thought any more about the papers?" "What papers, dear?" I asked, snipping off a dead leaf. "Mum, please don't do this," she said, her voice turning sharp. "The power of attorney papers. We need to get this sorted out." "I have it sorted out," I said calmly. "Everything is taken care of." I didn't say how. I just let her sit with that. The silence on the other end of the line was very satisfying. That evening, I sat in my armchair, the one with the worn floral pattern. A soft wool blanket was tucked over my lap. The television was on, but the volume was low, just a murmur in the background. I was looking through an old photo album. There I was, holding Mark as a baby. There was Susan on her first bicycle, her face a mixture of terror and delight. I had been there for every fever, every scraped knee, every school project. I hosted every holiday. I baked every birthday cake. I remembered driving 3 towns over in a snowstorm to bring Susan the textbook she had forgotten for her college final. I had always been there, the reliable one, the one who would drop everything. They didn't see me as a person anymore. They saw me as a resource that was starting to fail. "I didn't die," I whispered to the quiet room. "I just stopped being convenient." Mark stopped by on Friday. He didn't call first. He used his key to let himself in. I was in the kitchen, listening to the radio and peeling potatoes for a shepherd's pie. The familiar scent of raw earth filled the air. "Mum," he said, standing in the doorway. He looked tired. "We need to talk." "Hello, Mark. Would you like a glass of iced tea?" I asked, not looking up from my work. The peeler made a soft, rhythmic scraping sound. "No, I don't want tea." He sat down at the kitchen table. He ran a hand through his hair. Susan told me you said everything was taken care of. What does that mean? Did you lose the papers? We can get new copies. I put the peeler down and looked at him. My son. His face was lined with worry, but it wasn't worry for me. It was worry for himself. I didn't lose them, I said, and I don't need new copies. Then what's the problem? He asked, his voice rising. We're just trying to help you. Are you? I asked quietly. I picked up another potato. I didn't need to say anything more. He just sat there, watching me, the silence stretching between us. On Monday morning, I woke up knowing what I had to do. The sun was just starting to filter through my lace curtains, making patterns on the old wooden floor. The church bells were ringing for the 8 o'clock service, a distant, gentle sound. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a piece of toast. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I just felt a sense of purpose. This was a loose end, and I was a woman who liked to tie up loose ends. I picked up the phone. I called Mark first. Mark, it's your mother, I said. I'd like you and Susan to meet me tomorrow, 10 o'clock. At the house? I have a meeting, Mom. I don't know if I can. Not at the house, I interrupted. We're meeting at Mr. Davis's office. He's expecting us. I hung up before he could ask any more questions. Then I called Susan and told her the same thing. There. It was done. The meeting was set. I arrived at Mr. Davis's office 10 minutes early. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked a slow, steady rhythm. The air smelled of lemon polish and old paper. I sat in a comfortable leather chair, the one facing the window, and watched the clouds drift by. I felt calm, the way you feel after a storm has passed and the air is clean. Mark and Susan arrived together right at 10. They rushed in, their faces tight with a mixture of annoyance and suspicion. Susan's purse clicked when she set it on the little table. Mark didn't sit down. He stood over me, his hands on his hips. All right, Mum. What is this all about? He demanded. I had to move a conference call for this. It's about the papers, I said simply. The ones you were so worried about. Susan sat on the edge of the chair opposite me. We were just trying to help, Mom. There was no need to be so dramatic and involve Mr. Davis. I just smiled and looked toward the door as Mr. Davis entered. Mark, Susan, please have a seat, he said, his voice calm and professional. We all sat around the big mahogany desk. Mr. Davis had a single, thin file in front of him. A shaft of sunlight cut across the room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Mark tapped his fingers on the arm of his chair. Susan kept smoothing her skirt. Your mother asked you here today to provide you with an update on her affairs, Mr. Davis began. He opened the file. She wanted to put your minds at ease. I saw Mark and Susan exchange a small, triumphant look. They thought I had given in. They thought they had won. As you've expressed concerns about her well-being and financial security, Mr. Davis continued, Helen has taken decisive legal steps to ensure she is, as you put it, taken care of. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. She has established a fully funded, irrevocable trust. The tapping from Mark's fingers stopped. Susan's hands went still in her lap. A trust, Mark said, the words coming out flat. What does that mean? It means, Mr. Davis said, looking at him over his glasses, that all of your mother's assets, the house, the savings, all of it, are now legally owned and controlled by the trust, of which she is the sole trustee. The silence in the room was so thick I could feel it pressing on my ears. The only sound was the steady tick-tock of the grandfather clock. Susan's face was pale. Mark looked like he'd been slapped. I don't understand, Susan finally whispered. Why would you do that? I looked at my daughter, the one whose hair I used to braid every morning for school. I did it for my own peace of mind, I said softly, to make sure everything was handled properly. Mark found his voice. Handled properly? We were going to handle it? This is ridiculous. Can we see this document? Mr. Davis slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a summary of the trust. Mark snatched it up. His eyes scanned the page, his frown deepening. Then he stopped. I knew what he was reading. What is this? He asked, his voice low and angry. What is this line at the bottom? Mr. Davis answered for me, his tone perfectly neutral. That is a specific clause your mother requested be included in the legal filing. He cleared his throat. It reads, My mind is sharper than your greed. Mark threw the paper down on the desk. His face was a dark, mottled red. Greed? You think this was about greed? We were trying to protect you. Susan started to cry, small, sniffing sounds. I can't believe you think that of us, Mom, after everything we've done for you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I looked from my son's angry face to my daughter's weeping one. What have you done? I asked, my voice quiet but clear. You came into my home, the home your father and I built, and you questioned my mind because I misplaced my reading glasses. You brought papers to sign me away like an old piece of furniture you didn't want to deal with anymore. I stood up. My knees felt strong. The matter is settled. My affairs are in order. You don't have to worry about me anymore. I picked up my purse. Thank you for your time, Robert. I walked to the door, my back straight. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me, full of shock and anger. But for the first time, their feelings were not my problem to manage. Walking out of that building and into the bright sunshine felt like taking my first breath after being underwater for a long time. The city noises, the rumble of a bus, the chatter of people on the sidewalk, sounded clear and distant. I got into my car and just sat there for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. The vinyl was warm from the sun. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt light. The heavy weight that had been sitting on my chest for weeks was gone. I had taken care of myself. I drove home, not fast, not slow. I stopped at the grocery store and bought a small, beautiful steak and a head of lettuce. When I got home, the house was quiet and still. It felt different. It felt entirely mine. I walked out to the backyard. The new rose bush I had planted had a tiny, perfect bud on it, its deep red petals furled tight. I touched it gently with my finger. It was a promise of things to come. The silence was the first thing I noticed. For 2 full days, my phone didn't ring. No just checking in calls from Susan. No texts from Mark asking if I'd taken my pills. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the mantel clock. It wasn't a lonely silence. It was a peaceful one. I spent the morning in my garden. My new rose bush had another tiny bud. I pulled weeds from around my tomato plants, the sun warm on my shoulders. The rich, dark soil felt good under my fingernails. I talked to the birds and listened to the rustle of the leaves in the big oak tree. In the afternoon, I baked a lemon pound cake, just for myself. The kitchen filled with the bright, clean scent of citrus and sugar. I didn't make it for anyone else. I didn't have to worry if it was someone's favorite. I cut a thick slice while it was still warm and ate it at my kitchen table, looking out at my green yard. The cake was perfect. The phone finally rang on the 3rd day. It was Susan. Her voice was cold, all the fake sweetness gone. I just wanted to let you know that you've ruined Thanksgiving, she said. No hello, no how are you? I took a slow sip of my morning coffee. It was hot and strong. Hello, Susan. How have you been? How have I been? She snapped. How do you think I've been? My own mother thinks I'm a greedy monster. The children are asking why they can't come to Grandma's for the holiday. Thanksgiving is 5 months away, I said calmly. And my door is always open. You know that. It's not the same. And you know it, she said, her voice rising. After what you did, accusing us like that, in front of a lawyer. I looked at the little pot of violets on my windowsill. I didn't accuse you of anything, dear. I just protected myself. There's a difference. She hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. I put the phone down and finished my coffee. A few days later, I was at the grocery store. I was taking my time, reading the labels, enjoying the cool air that smelled of fresh bread and roasted chicken. I saw a flyer on the community bulletin board near the entrance. It was for a book club at the public library. They were meeting on Thursday to discuss a novel I had always meant to read. I stood there for a minute, holding my little grocery basket. I hadn't joined anything new in years, not since Henry passed. It felt like a big step. I thought about sitting at home, waiting for another angry phone call. Then I thought about sitting in the library, surrounded by books and people who wanted to talk about them. I pulled one of the little tear-off tabs with the phone number from the bottom of the flyer. The paper was smooth in my hand. I tucked it into my purse, next to my wallet. It felt like a ticket to somewhere new. Thursday came. I put on a nice blouse and a bit of lipstick. The library was just as I remembered it, quiet and smelling of old paper and wood polish. The book club met in a small room in the back. There were about 6 other women there, all around my age. A friendly woman with bright silver hair and glasses on a chain smiled at me. Hello, she said. We haven't seen you before. I'm Agnes. I'm Helen, I said, taking a seat in a sturdy wooden chair. It's my first time. Well, welcome, Helen. Her smile was genuine. The discussion started, and I mostly listened. The women were smart and funny. They didn't all agree, but they were polite. It felt good to just be in a room with other people, talking about ideas. After the meeting, Agnes walked out with me. So, what did you think of the book? She asked. I thought the ending was a little rushed, I admitted. She laughed. Me too. Are you coming back next month? Yes, I said, surprising myself. I think I will. Mark's call came on a Saturday morning. I was watering my houseplants, the mist from the spray bottle cool on my skin. His tone was different from Susan's. It was all business. Mom, he said, I've been thinking. Now that you've done this trust thing, who's helping you with the bills? The property taxes are due soon. The house insurance. It's a lot to keep track of. He was testing me, looking for a crack, looking for the forgetful old woman he thought I was. It's all taken care of, Mark, I said, wiping a leaf on my ficus tree. What does that mean, taken care of? He pressed. Did you set up automatic payments? Do you even know how to do that online? Mr. Davis helped me arrange it, I said, my voice pleasant and calm. The trust handles all the household expenses directly. It sends me a statement every month. It's very well organized. There was a long pause on his end of the line. I could almost hear him thinking, running into a wall he couldn't get around. Oh, he finally said. The word was small and empty. Well, just wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm more than okay, dear, I said, looking at the sunshine streaming through my clean window. I'm just fine. Summer settled over the neighborhood, warm and lazy. The days were long. I spent my mornings in the garden and my afternoons reading on the porch swing. The gentle creak of the chains was a comforting rhythm. My new friend Agnes from the book club would sometimes stop by. We'd drink iced tea and talk about everything and nothing. One afternoon, she pointed to my rose bush, which was now covered in deep red blooms. "That's a beautiful rose, Helen. What's it called?" "I don't know the name," I said, watching a bee buzz among the petals. "I just call it Independence." Agnes smiled. "A perfect name." It was a small thing, having a friend to share a quiet afternoon with. But it felt big. It felt like my world was getting wider again, not smaller. My grandchildren's birthdays came and went. I sent cards, just like always. Inside each, I tucked a crisp $20 bill. Not a big check from my savings, just a little something from Grandma. I didn't get a thank you call from my grandson, Mark's boy. But my granddaughter, Susan's daughter Amy, called me herself. "Grandma, thank you for the card," she said, her young voice sweet and clear. "You are very welcome, sweetheart," I said, a warmth spreading in my chest. "How are you?" "I'm good. Mom's been kind of stressed out lately." There was a little pause. "I miss coming over for your cookies." "Well, the cookie jar is always full," I told her. "You can come over anytime you like." I knew Susan probably wouldn't let her, but it was important that Amy heard the invitation directly from me. One hot afternoon in July, I was cleaning out the hall closet. It was full of things I hadn't looked at in years. Old coats, board games with missing pieces, a box of Henry's old work boots that still smelled faintly of motor oil. In the back, I found my old watercolor set. I hadn't touched it since before the children were born. The paints were all dried up, hard little cakes of color. The brushes were stiff. I took the box out to the kitchen table and set it in a patch of sunlight. I remembered how much I used to love painting. I would sit in the backyard for hours, trying to capture the light on a leaf or the color of the sky. I thought about Mark and Susan saying I needed a hobby to keep my mind sharp. They probably meant bingo or a knitting circle. The thought made me smile. On my next trip to the store, I bought a new set of paints and a pad of thick, creamy paper. My first painting was of the rose bush. It wasn't very good. The colors were muddy, and the petals looked stiff. But I didn't care. The feeling of the brush in my hand, the way the water and color mixed on the paper, it felt like coming home to a part of myself I had forgotten. I set the painting up on the mantel to dry. It was crooked and amateurish, but it was mine. I kept at it. I painted the bird bath in the yard, the pot of violets on the windowsill, the view of my neighbour's roof. Slowly, my hand got steadier. The colours got brighter. Agnes came over one day while I was painting on the porch. The air smelled of turpentine and iced tea. She looked at my little stack of paintings. "Helen, these are wonderful," she said, holding up a picture of my tomato plants. "Oh, they're just silly things," I said, feeling a little embarrassed. "They are not silly," she insisted. "They're full of life. Have you ever thought about taking a class? The community centre has a wonderful watercolour class for seniors." The thought of a class was scarier than the book club. What if everyone was better than me? What if the teacher thought I was terrible? All the old fears crept in. For a day, I put my paints away. Then, I was out weeding, and I looked at my hands, covered in dirt. I thought about how strong they were. They had raised children, kneaded bread, planted gardens, and signed the papers that gave me back my life. These hands were not afraid of a little paintbrush. I called the community centre the next morning. The woman on the phone was cheerful. Yes, our watercolour class has one spot left. It starts next Tuesday. Sign me up, I said, my voice clear and firm. That Tuesday, I walked into the bright, airy art room at the community centre. It smelled of paint and possibility. The teacher was a man named Mr. Henderson, with a kind smile and paint stains on his shirt. He looked at my painting of the rose bush, which I had brought with me. Good instinct for colour, he said with a nod. Welcome to the class, Helen. I took my seat at an empty easel, and for the first time, I didn't feel like Mark and Susan's mother. I didn't even feel like Henry's widow. I just felt like Helen, an artist. The art class became the best part of my week. I learned how to mix colours to capture the exact grey-blue of a cloudy sky. I learned how to let the water do the work, creating soft edges and happy accidents. My teacher, Mr. Henderson, was a patient man with gentle hands. He never made me feel foolish for my mistakes. One Tuesday, he stood behind my easel, watching me paint a picture of the old church downtown. The air in the classroom smelled of wet paper and coffee. "You have a good eye for light, Helen," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You're not just painting the building, you're painting the morning." I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. It was pride, a feeling I hadn't felt for a long, long time. After class, Agnes and I would go to a little diner for a piece of pie. We'd talk about our paintings and our gardens. We never talked about my children. I didn't need to. As the leaves started to turn, a new kind of quiet settled in. The angry phone calls stopped. So did all the other calls. For weeks, I heard nothing from Mark or Susan. It was an odd feeling, like a humming noise that suddenly stops. You don't realize how much it was bothering you until it's gone. I kept busy. I joined Agnes for her morning walks at the park. I volunteered at the library twice a week, mending the torn pages of children's books with special tape. The sticky, transparent tape and the smell of old glue were comforting. I felt useful. One day, I got a letter in the mail. It was a thick, creamy envelope with the logo of a downtown art gallery. My hands trembled a little as I opened it. The community centre was hosting a student art show at the gallery. Mr. Henderson had submitted my painting of the church. It had been accepted. The night of the art show was crisp and cool. I wore my good navy blue dress, the one I had worn to the lawyer's office. It felt like a lifetime ago. The gallery was bright and filled with people. Their chatter echoed off the high ceilings. My little painting was hanging on a clean white wall under a small, warm light. It looked different there. It looked important. I stood off to the side, just watching people as they walked by. Some glanced at it and moved on. But a few people stopped. They leaned in. They looked at the way the light hit the steeple. "That's a lovely piece," a voice said beside me. It was Mr. Henderson. "You should be very proud." "I am," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. A young couple stopped in front of my painting. The woman pointed. "I like that one," she said to her husband. "It feels so peaceful." I saw a small red dot on the label next to it. I asked Mr. Henderson what it meant. He smiled. "It means it's been sold, Helen." The first chill of autumn was in the air when Susan finally called. The timing wasn't an accident. Thanksgiving was just around the corner. "Mum," she said, her voice strained but polite. "I was just calling to coordinate for Thanksgiving. What time should we plan on getting there?" I was sitting on my porch swing, a warm afghan over my legs. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp leaves. "Hello, Susan," I said. "Actually, I won't be hosting this year." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background of her house. What? What do you mean you're not hosting? We always have Thanksgiving at your house. I know, I said calmly, but I've made other plans this year. My friends from my art class are having a potluck at the community center. Your art class. She said the words like they were from a foreign language. You're choosing an art class over your own family. I'm not choosing anything over anyone, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I'm just having a different kind of Thanksgiving this year. It took less than an hour for Mark to call. His voice was loud, booming with false authority. Mum, Susan just told me some nonsense about you cancelling Thanksgiving. What's going on? I watched a squirrel chase a blue jay across the lawn. I'm not cancelling it, Mark. I'm just not cooking a 20-pound turkey and 10 side dishes all by myself this year. This isn't about the food, and you know it, he snapped. This is about you punishing us. No, dear, I said, the porch swing creaking softly. This is about me taking care of myself. You were so worried about me being taken care of, remember? Well, this is what it looks like. I heard him sigh, a long, frustrated sound. Fine. Be that way. I hope you and your new friends have a wonderful time. He hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down beside me. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought it would make a beautiful watercolor. Thanksgiving at the community center was noisy and cheerful. The big hall smelled like a wonderful mix of turkey, sweet potatoes, and pumpkin spice. Everyone brought a dish. I brought 2 of my lemon pound cakes, and they disappeared in minutes. I sat at a long table with Agnes and Mr. Henderson and some other ladies from my art class. We ate on paper plates and drank cider from plastic cups. No one asked me if I'd taken my pills. No one watched me to see if my hands were shaking. We just talked and laughed. An old man played holiday songs on an out-of-tune piano, and some people even danced. It wasn't my old Thanksgiving, with the good china and the polished silver. It was something different. It was loud and a little messy, and it was the best Thanksgiving I'd had in years. A few weeks before Christmas, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. It wasn't a Christmas card. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it at my kitchen table, the one where I had faced my children. Inside was a check for $250. It was for my painting of the church. I held the check in my hand for a long time. The paper was crisp and official. It wasn't about the money. Henry's pension and my social security were more than enough to live on. It was the idea of it. I had made something, and someone had valued it enough to buy it. I, Helen Gable, a 72-year-old woman my children thought was losing her mind, was a paid artist. I laughed out loud, a sound that filled my quiet kitchen. Christmas Eve was quiet. A light snow was falling outside, dusting the trees and muffling the sounds of the neighborhood. I had a small tree in my living room, decorated with ornaments I'd collected over 50 years. I sat in my armchair, sipping a cup of hot cocoa, watching the snow fall. The house was peaceful. Around 9 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find my granddaughter Amy standing on the porch. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and she was holding a small, clumsily wrapped gift. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice small. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart." I ushered her into the warmth. She took off her coat, which was damp with melting snow. "Is your mother with you?" Amy shook her head. "No, I took the bus. I told Mom I was going to my friend's house." She looked at me, her young face serious. "I wanted to give you this." She handed me the gift. Inside was a framed picture of the 2 of us, taken a few years ago at the zoo. We were both laughing. I miss you, she said. I made Amy a cup of cocoa, and we sat by the tree. The little white lights twinkled, reflecting in her eyes. Mum and Uncle Mark are still mad, she said, staring into her mug. They talk about you. They said you're being selfish. I reached out and put my hand over hers. Her skin was so smooth and young. Sometimes, Amy, taking care of yourself looks like selfishness to people who are used to you taking care of them. She looked up at me, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. I get it, she whispered. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just watching the snow fall outside the big window. Before she left, I gave her a tin of the Christmas cookies I had baked. Just for you, I told her. Don't you share them. She gave me a quick, fierce hug at the door, a hug that warmed me more than any fire. Spring came again, as it always does. The snow melted, and the first green shoots of my crocuses pushed through the cold earth. I spent my days painting, walking with Agnes, and tending to my garden. My life was small, but it was full. It was mine. One morning, I was sitting on my porch swing with my first cup of coffee. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and new beginnings. The church bells were ringing in the distance. My rose bush, the one I called Independence, was covered in new green leaves. I had painted it a dozen times, but it looked different every day. I didn't know what the future would bring. Maybe my children would come around, and maybe they wouldn't. Maybe I would sell another painting, or maybe I wouldn't. It didn't matter. The quiet hum of the world waking up was enough. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was hot and strong. The sun was rising, casting a warm, golden light over everything, and I was here to see it.